Thank you for tuning into another episode of Science into Another World News. So, the other day I was thinking about a case, or should I say, I came across the case, which I already knew about the case like a long time ago. I don't think I've ever talked about it on my channel. I'm like, I should bring this case up because it's really, really weird what happened to this poor man. And nothing screams like extraterrestrial, ET, or non-human intelligent involvement, as they want to call it now, as it relates to this case, because something really, really weird happened to this poor man. And so his name was Zygmunt Jan Adamski. I had to write that down to make sure I got it right. But his family and friends called him Ziggy for short. So on June the 6th, Ziggy Adamski went out to go do some local shopping and stuff. And he was getting ready for I think it was his daughter's or his stepdaughter's wedding and everything. And that day, and he needed to go out to the store, so he left his house. Oh, and so this was set over in England, Wakefield. Let me get this right. Near Wakefield, Yorkshire, England. So Ziggy Adamski had left his house around 3 o'clock, I believe. Yeah, around 3:30. He went to the local stores, and when he didn't come back, his family got worried because that was unusual for him. Normally the stores aren't that far, so it doesn't take him that long to get back home because he walked. And when he didn't return, his family got worried, so they got the police involved. So he went missing on June the 6th, 1980. His body was found 5 days later, June 11th. So, and the people in town, so the police actually went to and talked to people in town, and they said, yeah, we saw him. He came to the store, he bought this, but he left like a while ago. So no one could find him in town. He wasn't in the town where he was from. And so like 5 days later, in a coal yard, a gentleman named Trevor Parker, who was working his father's coal yard, saw something dark sitting up on top of this mound of coal. Like, and the mound of coal was like really, really high. He didn't think anything of it because from what I understand, he said like homeless people came and slept in the coal yard all the time, and he just thought it was somebody who was drunk or homeless or whatever sleeping up there. And then he went back to work. And then he still saw the figure up there. So he decided to go later. He decided to go over to the mound of coal and climb up there. And no, I think he didn't climb up there. I'm sorry, I'm getting this wrong. He ended up calling the police or whatever to come get the person, or he called the ambulance because he thought the person needed help. So the ambulance came. They climbed up on this mound of coal or whatever, and then they realized this person was not drunk, was not homeless. The person was dead, and it was Ziggy Adamski up on this mound of coal way up high. But what the paramedics saw terrified them. And the guy, literally ran down the pile of coal, literally almost falling or tumbling to get down. So when he got down, they say he had a look of horror on his face. So they were like, we need to get the police involved. So the police come, and they identified this man as George, I should say George, Ziggy Adamski. And what was weird is when they turned Ziggy Adamski over, it looked like he had died of he had his face was like contorted or something. They said like he had something terrified him so much. Right at the moment of his death, his face was like contorted and locked into that position. I can't really explain it, but it looked like he basically died of fright. But the weird thing is about this case, when they found him, he was clean. No soot on him. If you're climbing up on piles of coal, you're going to be covered in soot. Your clothes are going to be filthy, filthy black, but his clothes were spotless. Not a single drop or whatever. He just wasn't dirty like most people would be considered if you're crawling up on coal, but his suit was perfectly clean. And what else was weird about this case was his hair was like out of place. Because, I said he was getting ready for a wedding. So when he left the house, he was neat and everything. But when they found his body that day, it looked like his hair had been messed with. Like someone like cut pieces of his hair out, and there was like patches of it missing, whatever. And then he also, the other weird thing is, the clothes he had on was like a brown suit, but it wasn't his clothes. It was like somebody tried to put clothes back on him, but they didn't know how to put it back on him properly. So he had like a pants on, and he had like the suit jacket, but there was no shirt on under the suit jacket, and everything was buttoned up wrong, and it was just a weird thing. But what is really weird is that he, on the back of his neck, he had like a wound or something. I think a couple of burns, but on the wound it was like this green jelly like substance that they couldn't identify. From what I understand, they still haven't been able to identify it, because I think they talked about this case back in 2003. Someone from the police force here talked about this case, and they could never identify that green jelly substance that was on the back of the wound on the back of his neck. Almost, I guess, like maybe like a puncture mark or slice or something, but they could never identify it. So anyway, so the police are involved. They do their investigation. They could not figure out. So then they take his body to the morgue, whatever. So then they get the doctor involved who's gonna do the autopsy. And from what the doctor said, they said he died of a heart attack. But what's weird is, because they did like conscious on his stomach. I know when you do an autopsy, they said that he had died that same day that he was found. So he was missing for 5 days. And when they say he was missing for 5 days, it made me think of Travis Walton, because Travis Walton was missing for a week too. But he was missing for 5 days, but he died that same day, June 11th, that he was brought back. And they said that from his stomach contents, he had been drinking water, he had been eating. They didn't say what he had been eating or what type of food, but they did say he had food in his stomach, so he wasn't being starved. So where was he those 5 days? What had he been eating? Was there something in his stomach, some type of food substance they could not identify, and they kept it from the public? But as far as I know to this day, they couldn't identify, they couldn't figure out where he had been for these 5 days, that he was kept alive and like he was in pretty much good health, but he died that same day that he returned. Now, my thing is, okay, let's just say, for instance, it was an ET abduction, and they kept him on wherever they kept him for like 5 days, and he was so stressed out. Maybe he thought he wasn't going to go back home, and they were just going to keep him, and he ended up dying from a heart attack, being, I want to say, held captive. I don't know if that's the right word, because I don't know the mind of an alien. And maybe on that 5th day that he was returned, that he died from a heart attack, because he was just terrified and scared, and they didn't know what to do with his body, so they just placed it somewhere that was close to where they were hovering, or I don't know. I was just trying to figure this thing out. But yeah, when they said that he was missing for 5 days, he returned on the 5th day, I just thought about Travis Walton. How Travis Walton was missing for 5 days, and he was on this craft for 5 days. I mean, everything about Ziggy Adamski's case screams possible non-human alien ET involvement to me. I don't know what you guys think, but I don't know. There's just so much strangeness. And from what I understand, the doctor says that the marks on his back of his neck didn't cause his death. They weren't deep enough to do anything. But they still couldn't figure out what that green jelly substance was that was on these wounds. I don't know. Maybe they were testing him or experimenting on him. Because we know from abduction stories that people do get medical procedures when they go on board these crafts. Not all the time, but a majority of the time when they're abducted, they do have medical procedures done. So maybe something happened and they put this substance on him to heal his wounds, keep it from getting infected. I don't know, but my thing is, if the doctors don't think the wound caused, they can't identify the green substance, so technically they can't rule out the possibility that maybe he had like a bad reaction to this green substance that they put on the back of his neck. But then I don't know, because we've had people being abducted for a while now, so obviously these beings know our physiology, if it's the same beings that's been here that are constantly seen, because from abductions it typically seems to be the grays that are doing most of the abductions. But I think along with maybe like the tall whites, whatever, but it's typically the grays, so, and they seem to have been here a long time, so I would think they tend to know our physiology. So I don't think he probably didn't have a bad reaction from the green substance. But like I said, I wasn't there, so I don't know. But he probably did die from a heart attack, or maybe the stress of being wherever he was and thinking he's not going to get back to his family. Something unnatural happened to that poor man. And I don't know, I just, I don't think it was human related. I don't think it was, I mean, it could be human related, but like alien human. Like, we've heard of stories of humans on board these crafts, which I think are either hybrids or maybe humans that were taken from like decades ago, and they've been on these other planets with these greys or these ETs. They've been like genetically altered and they've been living with them. So they could be alien humans or whatever. I don't know. I'm just speculating here. But I know from reading about this case and looking it up that something really, really, really weird happened to this poor man. And he was a family man, and they just said that was unlikely. They knew something was wrong that same day that he didn't come back, because he was taking care of his wife, because his wife had MS. They had immigrated from Poland during World War II to England and whatever. And so they had built a life there, and there was no way they knew that he was, because they tried to speculate that he was stressed out from his wife being sick and everything, and I can't remember the other stuff, maybe bills, I don't know, work related, that he wanted to retire early because he was a coal miner because of health issues, but he couldn't retire. And they tried to say that he took off, but obviously he didn't take off, because they found his body in that coal yard. And what is weird, in the coal yard was like, I think 25 miles away from where he lived. Let me see if I can find that, because I didn't have that written down. So let's see. So his body was found in Todmorden, let's see. So his body was found on top of a 10-foot high pile of coal at Trevor Parker's father's coal yard in Todmorden, which is 20 miles from Tingley, from where he lived. So how did he get there? Because he didn't have a car. He walked to the town that he was going to, which wasn't that far from his house. So you tell me how you think he got there, because I pretty much have an idea how I think he got there. And it goes on to say his clothes were properly fastened and his hair had been cropped short. But there's other stuff in this article. You have to do your own research on this case, because they don't go into detail about it, but I've done my other research. And besides his hair being cropped short, patches of his hair had been missing. Like, whoever did this took samples and stuff, but I don't know how many pieces, how much hair did you need to take? Yeah, so the coroner and the police was just stomped. The coroner even said it was the strangest mystery of his career. And he said this back in 2003 to BBC. The police just never figured out. It was just, today it's a mystery, because they don't know what happened to this man. Let's see. Also, what is other weird is in relation to this is Alan Godfrey, the police detective who was on his case, actually had a UFO encounter, I think a couple of days or a couple of weeks later, before Ziggy Adamski went missing and his body was found. So, yep, UFOs had been spotted in that area. So yeah, I don't know. That's just so for all you skeptics out there, you non-believers who think our planet isn't being engaged in something, you read this case, you study it, and dig up. And like I said, I tell people to do their own research. If you don't want to believe me, do your own research. Look into it. Look into the history of it. Something strange happened to that man, and it just, I'm pretty much telling you, it was not earthly human related. Maybe alien human related. Non-human alien related, but it wasn't. So yeah, that's my weird case for the week. I know I've never talked about this case to you guys before on my channel. It's a very interesting, fascinating. I feel bad for the family though, so that's really, really sad that that happened. So yeah, my thing is, like I said, 5 days went missing. He died that same day that he was returned, and I'm assuming whoever had him returned him because he died, and they just didn't really know what else to do with the body, so they just put him in the best spot. They laid him on top of this 10-foot pile of coal, and and that was it. So I do wonder, as far as that green jelly substance on the back of his neck, I wonder had the military or government stepped in to try to keep a hush on this. Maybe they have dug deeper into what that substance is and they're just not telling. Maybe his case is part of the reason. If you look at his case and what happened to him, maybe that's part of the reason why the U.S. military or government or the secret keeper who's been keeping this cover going is partially doesn't tell us why ETs are here. Maybe that's why they keep this cover up going, because of stuff like that. But still, it's not every case, because people have been taken and they've been returned. And there's been cases where people have seen these crafts land, and it seemed like back in the 50s and 60s, these crafts were landing all over the place, making contact with people, landing in people's yards, landing in like the case in Valence, France, where this farmer was out doing his lavender field. I can't think of his name at the moment. It was like at 5 o'clock in the morning. He hears like this weird buzzing, humming noise, and while he's out there working, he sees this object land in his lavender field, and these two beings get out, and it looks like they're studying his plants or whatever, but they see him come, and he's walking over to him, and they point like this little, some kind of device they had to mobilize him, and then I guess it's for their safety, and then they just get back in the craft and they take off. So every encounter doesn't happen with an abduction. So everybody's not being abducted. Everybody's not being experimented on. But yeah, but then you also have to wonder how many people have been taken and haven't been returned that we don't know about. Like if you study David Paulides' books, read his books, Missing 401, and if you've seen his documentaries, and I highly recommend you guys read David Paulides' book and watch his documentary, especially the one that came out later in relation to UFOs. It's really, really good. I've watched it like 3 or 4 times. I'm not going to spoil it for you. I just tell you to watch it. So it makes you think about how many people have been taken and haven't been returned. Like also the Frederick Valenti case that happened in Australia, that happened, I want to think back in the 80s. Hold on. Frederick Valentich. The disappearance of Frederick Valentich. He was a pilot flying over some part of Australia. He saw this object. And he knew it was an airplane. He knew it was a helicopter. It was something he couldn't identify. He called it in and was telling the people in the radar that there was an object in the sky that he couldn't identify. I'm trying to pull it up. I want to give you guys the date on that. Some of you guys probably already know the date on it though. So he was a 20-year-old pilot who found a flight plan at Morabin for a night flight to Kings Island, where he was to pick up some friends and then fly back. King Island is in the Bass Strait between Australia and Tasmania. So on October 21st, 1978, at 1819 hours, which is 6:19 p.m., Frederick Belinda took off in his single-engine Cessna 182 from Moorabbin Airport. Let's see. I'm not going to read all of this. And then he was flying across the Bass Strait at about 5,000 feet altitude. He told air traffic controller Melbourne that he could see a large craft below him and wanted to know if they were aware of any aircrafts in the area. Melbourne ATC said there were no known aircrafts in the area and asked if he could identify it. Frederick said he couldn't identify it, but it had 4 bright lights. The UFO then passed over him and appeared to be playing some sort of game with him. He said that the object was a long shape with very fast with a green light and some sort of metallic and sort of metallic, and that it was not an aircraft. The object was orbiting him and then just vanished. The UFO then reappeared, approaching from the southwest. Frederick reported that his engine was roughly idling and coughing. Melbourne ATC asked what his intentions were, and he replied, "My intentions are to go to King Island, Melbourne. That strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. It's hovering and it's not an aircraft." And the last transmission from him was at 7:12. And that was it. And he completely disappeared after that. Nothing was ever found for him. There was no wreckage in the ocean. They never found anything in no part of his aircraft. So whatever happened to him, it took his entire aircraft along with him. So yeah. So you have to wonder. I mean, people have been taken and haven't been returned. So I don't know. But so yeah, that's my thoughts. So you guys give me your thoughts on the Ziggy Adamski case and let me know what you think. And my last post I had was talking about alien abductions and people being taken, and every time they're taking that, they have egg and sperm and they're experimented on and tested. Like I said, that's usually not all the ways the case. Some of these objects just land. It's like they're studying like plants or whatever. Like the Lonnie Zamora case, the police officer in New Mexico who was chasing a suspect, and he was chasing a suspect, and from what I understand, he saw something off in the distance in like the desert or whatever in New Mexico, and he pulled over into the area to see where it was, and it was this egg-shaped oval type craft that had landed in the desert, and he saw these 2 figures, and he said they were childlike, like 4 feet, maybe 3 to 4 feet tall. And I think they were wearing a jumpsuit. These beings are always wearing a one-piece jumpsuit, maybe except for exceptions. There's been a couple of times when they said people have seen like taller beings, like mantis or whatever, wearing like a long robe. But typically, these encounters are always involved with these beings wearing a jumpsuit. But anyway, he saw this craft land, egg-shaped. It had like a symbol on the side. It was like a upside down V, I think, with a line over it written on the side of this craft, and it was on like 2 landing legs or whatever. And when he approached, well, he didn't get close to the ship, but he could see it, and the being saw him. And then they got back in the ship and craft, and then they just took off. Yeah. And I believe the FBI came out, and I think the Air Force came out. And of course, after that, his career went downhill. I think they tried to ridicule him. His life was never the same after that. Just really, because I know you can go in and find the story about it and everything. So yeah. James Fox actually talked about it. It was in his documentary. with Lonnie Zamora. Not the recent documentary he just did, but the I think it was the other one, The Phenomenon. He talked about it in that one. So yeah. So yeah. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think about the Ziggy Adamski case and the Frederick Valentich case also. So also, it's getting closer to the end of the month, so we'll see where these UAP UFO hearings go, if they go anywhere. So I don't know. I'm not holding my breath that anything positive is gonna come out of it, but mm, I'll still tune in and see what happens. So that's it. I'm out for now. Buenos noches, bon nuit, good night.